If you use the internet on a daily basis, and chances are you do, you probably don't put much thought into cybersecurity. You know, your network connections, the pages you visit, the files you download. You should be thinking about these all the time. Welcome to And Security for All. Your host is Kim Hakim. We're here to help you understand, in general terms, how and why your cybersecurity should be kept in check. Now, here is Kim Hakim.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of And Security for All. I am your host, Kim Hakim, and I'm very excited to be back again today. We just came off of our Detroit event. That was last week. For those of you, I know most of you already know that FutureCon, we put on cybersecurity conferences all over North America, and they have just been, I don't know what's going on in 2026, but Detroit was, I believe, like our fifth event of the year, and we're going to be in St. Louis this Thursday. That'll be our sixth event of the year, and they're literally standing room only. We're having to have overflow rooms. So thank you to all of our Detroit attendees that were out last week. Hopefully you guys all heard Arun Daruza. He was one of our panelists. And this week, my guest is Zach Lewis, who is the CISO and the CIO over at the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis. And he is going to be participating in a fireside chat that is going to kind of go right a little bit with what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about his book, which is titled LockBit Changed Everything and Locked Up Tells Why. So, Zach, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I can't believe another year has passed and St. Louis is back, and it's just, I really don't know what's going on, but we're having to turn off codes and shut down registration because we can't fit the people in the venue, and excited for just a packed event. But congratulations on your new book. Tell us a little bit about that, what inspired you, and how I know last time I talked to you, I think the book was just in the making, and so now it's here. So why don't we just start off with how did you decide to do this book, and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And in FutureCon in St. Louis, I think that's our first security event, first conference of the year in St. Louis. So it's everyone's very excited to get back into the swing of things, since the holidays. So it's always a good event. We're looking forward to it. But yeah, Locked Up is the name of the book. I published it with Wiley. It came out January 6th of this year, and it really just tells the story of a ransomware incident that we had at the university. And I wanted to write this book to tell everything that happened pre, during, and sort of post breach, because there's nothing out there on it. And practitioners are likely going to run into this at some point. So having a almost like a reference guide, not so much a how-to, but a reference guide on what these ransomware attacks are going to look like, how to respond, decisions that they're going to have to make, different things that affect the business, and just sort of prepare them for it, really. And that's kind of what I wanted to give the community.
So tell us a little bit, before we dive into the book. It was really interesting because I had Michael Maynard, if I'm saying his last name right. I had him on the podcast a couple of times. I did a part 1 and a part 2, and I found him so fascinating, what he was doing, and how he was going kind of undercover on the dark web. And I thought you two would be just the perfect pair to team up. Tell our audience a little bit of what the keynote's going to be about this Thursday, and then we'll kind of talk a little more about your book.
Yeah, so Matt and I want to get together and sort of just talk through, what ransomware attacks look like, what are threat actors doing out there, who are these threat actors, where are they operating from, and a real, it is a fireside chat, so we want to keep it very conversational, not real slide heavy, and just have this back and forth dialogue. Matt, what are you seeing? How are threat actors getting into companies, and compare that sort of to the real world attacks that I've actually experienced and worked through, and see if that matches up. And we're going to talk about different nation states, different threat actor groups, and just what they're talking about, what different techniques they're trying to do right now, and see what's going to work best for your organization. So it should be a pretty interesting conversation. Matt's doing some fantastic work out there, and some of the conversations he's had with threat actors on the dark web is pretty scary and pretty crazy.
It is very scary. I was floored. Like I couldn't even get enough information out of one episode of this and Security for All. I had to have him back the next week because I was just so intrigued with how he's really. I mean, it's a little dangerous what he's doing, if you ask me. So I'm excited to hear that talk that you guys are going to have. So let's talk about like what is the basis of Locked Up, and tell us about what your book covers. And again, I know that you have always been a super cautious person in the industry, just with your real life in general, because we're all with AI now. It's probably been a year or so since I've talked to you, and AI is just accelerating attacks so much more. And what are you in your own world? I know on the human side of things, you live in a very protective world. So tell us about the book and what people are taking away from the book.
Yeah, so the book starts with what seemed like a normal everyday IT outage that we started troubleshooting. This took place back in 2023, and that quickly scaled into finding a ransomware note and seeing what the threat actors wanted and going into negotiations with them and really seeing how that world kind of operates. LockBit at the time was the most prolific ransomware group in the world. They'd taken companies like Boeing and TSMC, which is the largest semiconductor manufacturer in the world, over in Taiwan. They've done the Ministry of Defense out of the UK. So like these really large companies that have really large cybersecurity budgets, we're falling to these guys. So what does a small university in the Midwest going to do if they want to come in? They seem to be really good at finding these openings, and we see these ransomware attacks increasing year over year. We're getting a little bit better at sort of recovering from them, so with backups and restorations and stuff, but we've gotten no better at really preventing them. And I don't know what to do about that. There's still this weird mark of shame sort of in the industry when someone has a ransomware attack, your company suffers one. We almost want to keep it really quiet, sort of sweep it under the rug and not tell anybody about it. And maybe that's part of the problem, that we should be, sharing how these threat actors get in so we can sort of bolster our defenses and keep them out. And that's what I detail in the book. I go into, how these threat actors got in, how LockBit got in, what they were able to escalate their permissions to and sort of exfiltrate data, and what kinds of data they got, and how good their customer support was, and what they were willing to do for you, and how the negotiation worked. And it's really interesting seeing how these ransomware-as-a-service groups operate, because it's like a real world business. They have quotas of companies that they need to attack and data they have to exfiltrate, but they also have great customer service. So you can be like, hey, I'm having trouble decrypting my files if you've paid for a ransom key, and they'll help you. It's really wild that they're willing to work, and you're almost guaranteed to get a key or some support, because they want you to pay the money, and they want people to know that they're going to get their keys back and their data back, because if not, then their business falls apart. So it's a really weird dark comedy of business operating out there, and it's really wild. So we go from the attack all the way to the end of the attack on when they post our data, and how we sort of respond to our data being posted and what's in it, and sort of then how we recovered and bolstered our security after that. So the reader's going to get a whole breadth of story and information on what all goes into a ransomware attack. And then I leave the readers with a little bit of a sort of a how-to, lessons learned plan of good things to do, best practices in the industry in case they're just starting building a security at their company. But you mentioned some interesting stuff about AI. I think AI is definitely scaling attacks a lot more. You're not seeing the phishing emails with the misspelled words and bad grammar anymore. It's very cleaned up. It's very polished, very targeted to specific individuals. Deep fakes are on the rise. So there's a lot of stuff coming with the new technology, and it's coming faster than I think a lot of us can respond and adapt to.
And I kind of think it's 2026 has been so interesting because, again, I mentioned, when I was doing the introduction of the show, I've been doing these events for a long time, 25 plus years, and I have never, on every single city so far, we've been in LA, Dallas, Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, now St. Louis, and we are having to turn off registration. We we just can't we don't have big enough space for all the people that are coming to the event. So do you think that 2026, there has to be something that's changing, that people are taking the education? And I mean, I know FutureCon is great and we bring really great speakers and our reputation is out there, but something is going on that, these practitioners are wanting to get out and I guess just equip themselves with armor and knowledge. I mean, what do you think you're seeing already? We're only in February and I feel like so much is already happening in 2026.
Yeah, so 2026 is definitely going to be the year of the AI agent. We're seeing agents deploy out, companies all across the world doing automated tasks, and I think there's security concerns with that and what those agents are accessing and what they can do. And we've seen some mishaps in the news from agents deleting databases and files and misplacing stuff. But those bugs, those weird little things that happen are going to get ironed out, right? And those agents are going to get better and better and better. So I think we're also seeing a little bit of worry on the security front. IT people, security people are trying to really educate themselves on, hey, what's coming? What can these tools actually do? Can I use them to help augment my job? Are they coming for my job? What I need to know what's going on so I can prepare myself. What's going to help my company become more efficient, gain a competitive advantage. But also at the same time, like, are my end users just deploying these things and I don't know about it because I can't stop it? And is that going to cause a breach and then, cause me to have problems with my job and maybe have to look for a new job or something like that? So there's a lot of factors that play into that. And it's hard to really pinpoint down to one. I think people are just really hungry for information out there, and there's some concern and there's uncertainty about what that's going to mean for them in the future. And we've seen AI, grow, and AI is a very buzzwordy, but it's grown so much in the last 3 years. I think people used to discount it, and now it's starting to become like a real concern, because if it can increase this fast and become this much better in 3 years, what's it going to be in the next 3 years or in the next decade? And I mean, that's going to be a very different world, and we can't even begin to predict what that's going to look like.
Well, can you give us, I know, you want everyone to purchase your book and read your book, but can you give us a couple of little teasers in there on some of before we talk about the lessons learned, some of the real world ransomware attacks that you're seeing and the responses that you're seeing and how they're being mitigated?
Yeah, so some teasers in the book. We ran into a few issues during our ransomware recovery, and I put those in the book primarily because they're like little gotchas, things you don't think about. We had ran a tabletop exercise with our leadership team in the December before the event happened. So our attack happened in April of 2023. So in December 22, we ran a tabletop exercise where I brought in the leadership team and we went through like what everyone's job is. Hey, finance team, do you guys know how to buy Bitcoin if we ever needed to buy Bitcoin? Marketing, who's going to communicate to the students, the end users, the alumni, the general public? What are we going to do when the local media show up? Like, who's going to do this different stuff? What's legal look like? Who's contacting who? And really working through that. So when the event happened, people kind of knew how to operate. And I think that really helped ease some tension. Another big thing that we sort of a takeaway from that is I had a relationship with our board, and going into the incident when it happened, I was able to reach out to some of those key members, some people who were already a little bit IT savvy, and talk to them and discuss what happened, let them know what our plan was. So then when I actually got in there and had to present to that board level group of people, I had an ally in there who could like speak up and be like, oh yeah, Zach's doing what we've seen done. This is a very a regular sort of occurrence that happens. It's not great, but they're handling it the right way. And having someone in your court really, really helped out there. In addition to that, we ran into all kinds of sort of hurdles along the way, from restoring from backups. We found out that the threat actors had actually found some of our backups and completely erased them, wiped them out fully. Our Active Directory, which is how we authenticate and log into systems, was taken down. So it became very difficult to log into other backup services or even to our password management tool. So just little things like that we kind of learned along the way. That didn't prepare you in that tabletop exercise when you're running through a bunch of different scenarios. You just think like, oh, I'll just go into our backup software and restore. Well, how deep down on that have you gone? Is that server available? Do you have to restore it? Do you have to rebuild it? Do you have like keys to even license your software? So there's so many layers to that you can take it down to the root. And I don't think people are thinking about that. So I threw that in the book for just some lessons learned. Hopefully people take away from that. But in addition, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of chatter on places like LinkedIn and Amazon. We've gotten a lot of good reviews, a lot of good feedback, people taking it to their teams all over the world. We've seen Germany, UK, Israel, different places all over. People are reading this and getting back to me. I had one guy send me a video of him in Canada in a Barnes and Noble and finding it in there and purchasing it, which was actually pretty cool. But just seeing everyone sort of grab onto it and provide great feedback about how much they've loved it. And one guy said he was in an actual cyber attack. His company had just been hit, like a week before. He was reading my book. He was taking notes down, and some of it was actually helping him in his recovery. And I was like, well, that's awesome. That's exactly what it's for. So I'll take it. I'll take it for what it is.
So explain a little bit when you say the real world LockBit, when we're using the word LockBit. Explain that to my listeners, what you mean by LockBit.
So LockBit is both a type of ransomware and how it sort of encrypts your data and makes it inaccessible, but it's also a group that operates with that ransomware. And they operate as a ransomware-as-a-service, meaning they will build malware, they'll build viruses, they'll build this ransomware, and they will sell it to people. So you could be what they call an affiliate, and you'll come to them and you'll say, hey, I want to buy, this ransomware software. I'm going to use it to attack, McDonald's, for instance. And they'll say, okay, here you go. Here's this. We want 10% of whatever you take McDonald's for. So this other affiliate will go out. They'll try to run this attack at McDonald's. And if they're successful and McDonald's pays a ransom, part of that money will then go to LockBit for the cost of using their services, the cost of using their software. And so they've really made almost like a giant Ponzi scheme all the way down of how ransomware works. And the services that they're willing to sell. You can buy team members, you can buy software, you can buy tools, hosting sites, services, whatever. They're like a legitimate business, operating out there, and that's what they go by LockBit. So they've had a couple iterations. The version that we ran up against was called LockBit 3, or LockBit Black, it was also known as. About a year after our attack, though, the FBI was able to seize their site, bring it down, and they indicted several individuals. They actually managed to arrest a couple higher end individuals from LockBit. But in the last few months, we've actually seen them sort of partnering up with other ransomware groups, other threat actor groups that have been disrupted by law enforcement, and they're sort of forming a bit of a ransomware cartel out there of people that got disrupted, pulled back together, and trying to reform a new ransomware threat actor group to attack companies. So it's kind of interesting seeing how they, you take one site down and another one comes up. It's very whack-a-mole out there for law enforcement.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess, that's what Mike Maynard is doing, is, getting in there, disguising himself as an attacker. And the minute he feels like he's about to get caught, he pulls back and gets out and then goes to another group. But what can we keep up? Is it manageable to keep up with as fast as, because of AI? Is it, who's like coming out better, the attackers or us, or the security teams?
Sure. That's a great question. I think we've always seen an escalation of law enforcement to criminal, whether they were cyber criminals or we'll call them real world criminals over the years. If law enforcement were to get bulletproof vests, we see criminals getting armor-piercing bullets. If we see police officers getting assault weapons, we see criminals getting high-caliber, automatic weapons. So there's always an escalation and a back and forth, push and pull on what we're going to do. Just like end users trying to get around security controls, if they're persistent enough, they find a way, and the criminals aren't going to be shut down for long. So as we continue to pivot and new technologies come out to help us sort of stamp out these cyber groups, they stand right back up and they pivot to something else. There was some conversation recently in Washington about maybe making ransomware sort of illegal in terms of being able to pay a ransom. And they thought that might get threat actors from stopping to compromise hospitals and finance industries and different things like that, because we couldn't pay. I think that gets into a weird area on dictating what private companies can do. There was also some conversation about Do we label these threat actor groups as terrorists so governments have a little bit more control over going after them? And that's an interesting train of thought. It's just a lot of our cyber insurance policies are very specific in acts of terror not being considered insurable incidents. So if we did label a ransomware attack as a terrorist, then we wouldn't be able to use insurance to help us pay for a ransom or pay to recover or something like that. So there'd definitely be a time period there of real disruption and real headache for some companies. I think the threat actor groups would probably just pivot to some other way to compromise or hurt these companies, because this is, at the end of the day, it's their livelihood. It's the job that they've chosen to do. And unlike a cyber defender, our job is 9 to 5 or whatever. We go home to our families. These people have families too, and their job is hack and steal money. And if we don't, my family's not going to get fed, and they're going to go to jail if they get caught. Whereas if I lose, I maybe get, at worst, I get fired, maybe. Maybe not, but probably not going to jail unless the SEC decides to do something crazy like we've seen in the last couple of years. So it's an interesting dichotomy of how things bounce back and forth. I think we'll continue to pivot. I mentioned earlier that I think we've gotten a lot better at recovering. So companies are getting smarter about backups. We're putting them in different places, off-site, off-network, not tied to anything, and we can actually get to those, recover our data, recover our systems, which is great. But we're not any better at stopping that ransomware. There's still fundamental things probably around identity, access, data controls that we're still pretty poor on doing, which still lets these threat actors in, and they're getting our data. I think we're starting to see the threat actors now pivot from not so much encrypting the data and making it inaccessible, but they just want to steal the data, because a backup doesn't help in that instance, and they can still threaten the organization with posting that. So if they actually manage to steal some really sensitive data from you, and say, hey, if you don't pay $1 million, $10 million, whatever it might be, we're going to post this on the internet for everyone to get. You might really consider doing that. There's not a lot you can do to get that data back. So you either have to pay or you have to let it be posted. And hopefully it's not, health records or proprietary information or some big research or government, weapons program or something like that, right?
So I feel like when we first started talking about ransomware and where it really got big, maybe it was around COVID. I don't know. I just feel like the attackers have obviously gotten more sophisticated. And back then when we had the big breach with the, I just went blank, with the gas company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and they ended up paying the ransom. And then after that, we saw the big stuff out at Vegas. So back then, there were so many people saying, don't pay the ransom. Do you think it has changed today, people's opinion on paying the ransom?
I think it depends on industry. My understanding is that healthcare is very much a keep things operational, and it doesn't matter how we have to do that. So if that means, hey, we've got encrypted, we need to pay a ransom immediately because lives are on the line, then yeah, we're probably going to pay that ransom. That's unfortunate because we're funding cybercrime at that point, but you also don't want people to die. We've seen hospitals get interrupted by ransomware, and there has been a case or two where a patient has died because the hospital was encrypted with ransomware and could not administer life-saving medication and the precise dosage at the precise times that a patient needed it, which is a really hard decision to be in. I couldn't imagine some of the CISOs that I know being in that spot where they have to make that call on what we're going to do. So a lot of the time, yeah, they're paying the ransom in those industries in healthcare. I think again, it goes back to what kind of data they have. For us, we didn't end up paying the data or paying the ransom. We felt like we had a pretty good chance that the data wasn't going to be sensitive in any way, and it ended up not being. But other places, again, if you have, if the secret Coca-Cola formula comes out and it gets ransomed, they have it. Coke will probably pay that ransom to keep that from leaking. So it really depends on what's inside that data that dictates whether or not the ransom is going to be paid. I think just in general, though, people have gotten more used to hearing about cyber attacks, more used to getting these credit monitoring notices in the mail, and they've become a little desensitized to it, and they don't care as much when that information comes out. So really, it's coming down to like super proprietary information. I think that companies are really concerned on.
So Going back a little bit when you were talking about URLs and how, there used to be, it was easy if you were a practitioner to kind of catch that because there might be one letter different and everyone was trained on that. How are the attackers now? How is that changing when you're saying that the URLs are becoming more sophisticated? How give us an example of that.
Yeah, so used to with like phishing emails, you could read them and they'd have poor grammar, poor English, it wouldn't make sense, a word would be missing or something like that. Now, a attacker can put in what they want into a generative AI, and that'll come out in perfect English or perfect Japanese or perfect French or whatever you want it, wherever they're attacking, they can literally have that customized to the company that they're targeting. If they are watching the executives on social media or following them, they can say, oh, hey, Dr. Jones is going to be speaking at this summit today. I'm going to email his secretary this message based on all the content I know about Dr. Jones, everything that he's ever published, spoken on. I can put that into AI. AI can then craft me a message that sounds like Dr. Jones, and I'll send that to his secretary and say, hey, make sure we wire this money, or make sure we move these funds, or do this or do that. Buy these gift cards. So it becomes like really now they're emulating the voice of the person that they want to compromise, and that's become very easy. AI can spit that out for them in just a few seconds of research. The deep fake thing is pretty big. We've seen in St. Louis, the FBI has reported on this of a professor at a university got a call from someone claiming they'd kidnapped their child, and in the background you could hear the child's hollering for her parent or whatever, and come to find out the threat actors were just using AI to emulate their voice and telling them like, hey, you can't get off the phone with us, you have to stay on. If you don't, we're going to hurt your child, you need to pay us this money for the ransom, et cetera, et cetera. It ended up all being fake. The child was at home, fine, no problems at all. But this is important for families probably to establish like safe words or safe phrases or something to communicate back and forth if they're real or not. And it's unfortunate that we've kind of entered that world, right? But it's pretty crazy that that's actually happening right now, even in our city.
So what are you seeing as far as the difference of like the cyber, on our website, it says, and this has been on there for 8 years that, cybersecurity is no longer an IT problem. And I believe, well, we all know it's an everyone problem, but what is the responsibility to the practitioners? And we're seeing new things like BSOs and different titles, but how are we going to keep situations? It just reminded me, you talking about that situation, how terrifying would that have been for, the mother of that child or the professor that is not a practitioner? How would they, what is our responsibility in the community to educate all of those around us that are non-cyber practitioners?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big job, right? And you got to have conversations with your family, with your friends. There's some organizations out there really trying to do some stuff. So InfraGard's out there. I know that the FBI is out there. Citizens Academy. These different groups are all out there trying to educate the populace on what's going on. But the best we can do as practitioners is talk to our family and friends about what we're seeing and what's going on, and let them know about these sorts of attacks. I recently was able to do a local news segment on romance scams at Valentine's Day, and it's funny because those scams you wouldn't think like, oh, hey, this person's asking me for crypto, or this person is really interested in me. I don't know why, I've never met them, and they want to like run off together. But you'd think you'd see through that. But these kinds of scams hit they hit doctors, they hit lawyers, they hit business people, professors, all sorts of all different types of people, and they fall for it, and they sell us money. And it's just because they like aren't aware of what's going on in the world, and trying to get this out to more people is by far the most important thing we can do in our companies. Talking to the individuals, running workshops, running tabletops, sending communication, that's all good stuff. I think there's a lot. There used to be said that technology isn't going to fix a people problem. I think we're starting to see some of that technology, especially with AI, enter that realm where it can. And I go back to phishing emails, and I think about some of the advanced email security products that are available now that are scanning these emails coming in and looking at, well, has this person ever emailed you before? Where's the domain? How old is it? What are they asking you? Is there a call to action in there? Where do these links go? And hundreds and hundreds of different variables that these email security products looked at that can really just keep phishing from showing up at all in your company, which is pretty awesome because I mean, no matter how many times you go through like phishing training, if you have 2, 3, 4,000 people, someone's going to click the link, someone's going to submit information, and it just takes one person, it just takes one hole for these threat actors to get in. So if we can stop that across the board, that's even better. But I mean, the communication and the evangelism out to the masses about cybersecurity is very important. And again, with the technology going the way it's going, it's moving very quickly, and it's hard to stay on top of everything for sure.
So circling back about the ransom, and are we seeing that when the organizations or the companies are paying the ransom, are they getting their data back? Are the attackers, like, I hate to say, are they nice, but are they standing behind their word once they get the money? Are they actually, releasing the data? And is it, not everyone understands what the keys are and everything like that, but are they really getting everything back, and are they not vulnerable to those organizations still, coming back for more money after they pay them again? After they pay them once, are they going to come back again and say, I gave you your data back, but I still have it and I need more money?
Yeah, so typically when a company does pay to get their data back, to get their data, we'll call it decrypted, we'll say, we'll call that single extortion. They do typically get the keys to decrypt their data to make it readable again. They are getting those keys, because if they didn't, people wouldn't pay the threat actors, right? They'd be like, oh, you've encrypted my data, you're not actually going to let me get it back, so why would I pay you? So they're actually pretty upstanding threat actor citizens at that point, trying to get your access back. So they do help with that. So that's single extortion. Then we're seeing some double extortion, where they're encrypting your data. You pay a ransom, you get the decryption keys back, and then they're going, well, hey, now that you've got your data back, also we stole a bunch of your data too. We're going to need a second ransom to make sure we don't post that data. And so then you're hit again with that double extortion. And then it's another conversation. Well, do we pay another $5 million so they don't post this data on the internet for everyone to get? And that becomes another conversation, because if that's sensitive, if it has personal identifiable information or HIPAA data in there, then there's fines related to that. There's communication, there's credit monitoring, there's additional expenses that you're going to have to do with that. So these start to really rake up a lot of very quickly for some smaller organizations. There have been some triple extortions out there, but we won't dive into those. Historically, though, if you're paying to get your data back, you usually do get your data back, or those ransomware groups don't stick around very long. So they are they're good in that aspect, I'll say.
So I know you hate to say that, they're decent humans and they're going to walk away, because they're not. They're obviously bad actors, and they're out to harm, and it's just sad to see that, there's just some people that can't pay, and their business is gone, and everything they worked for is gone, and much more, like someone losing a life over it. When we talk about medical, I mean, that is really scary. So what are at the hospital level? Because again, the funding at certain hospitals, it's probably hard to even keep up with the security tools. So what are you seeing? How are the hospitals in the healthcare industry, how are they keeping up with keeping their security posture safe?
Yeah, most hospitals are having really good insurance plans, and if they have to, again, paying that ransom to get things unlocked, but they're also starting partnerships with other hospitals. So if something does go down, something is encrypted, ransom or whatever, they can move patients to those other hospitals so service can continue. I think it's really affecting is those rural community hospitals who are 30 miles, 40 miles from the next nearest facility. And they're kind of just out there on their own, right? They don't have a big base. They don't have a ton of funds, and it's hard. So you have to, partnering with MSPs or MSSPs, managed service providers, to help bolster your security. It's hard to find, really qualified teams to come in and work in security. Though it's funny, it seems like at the same time there's not enough like qualified people for some of those jobs, but and there's also a ton of a need for people in those jobs. It's really weird. There's a weird dichotomy there. But when you're in these rural areas, especially in the Midwest, there's just not a lot of cyber talent out there, and these companies need people to help, to guide, to instruct, and they're just kind of out there in a void. So it's really rough for the rural communities. Earlier, you also asked me about if companies get attacked again, if they paid the ransom, and we do see data that shows typically if you pay the ransom, you will likely be attacked again, whether by the same threat actor group or another one, because they do talk and they see when that data gets posted and when companies get attacked, you likely will be attacked again. So if you're going to go that route, be very sure you've plugged whatever vulnerability or whatever hole they came in on the first round, because you don't want to get hit at least in the exact same pattern that you did the first time. That doesn't look good at all. So if you're doing a ransom, make sure you're remediating and figuring out where they entered your company and sort of shutting that down and bolstering your defenses a little bit, because you will likely be attacked again.
So do these actors, just from what we know, if they know that, some of these rural communities and some of these municipalities that don't have a lot of money, is it even worth it for them to go after those kind of attacks if they know that there's no money there? I mean, in a way, does that make them a little safer? Because, what are you seeing from that?
Yeah, if they have insurance, it's worth going after it, because the insurance will pay that money for the ransom if need be, and that's kind of where they're at. We've seen a couple instances of threat actor groups actually breaching insurance companies, getting lists of clients and finding out what their deductibles are, what their premiums are, what their coverage is, and then going and attacking those companies and asking for that exact amount. Oh, hey, you're clear for $5 million. Well, I'm going to need $5 million to clear this up. And trying to extract that full amount of the insurance money. So they are very smart at doing that. And even these small hospitals that, if they have insurance, you can probably get $1 million to $5 to $10 million from an insurance company. Now, we've seen, again, hospitals suffer from that. We've seen patients die. We've seen universities have to close their doors because they got ransom and couldn't pay things off. And we've seen big companies be hit and not have insurance. And then that becomes a real situation, because do you shut the doors at that point if you can't pay? Do you take out a loan? What do you do to sort of pay that ransom? And there's a few routes to go, but none of it's very good. So insurance is almost like a hard requirement if you want to sort of dance that way and pay the ransom, because most companies just can't afford to drop $5-10 million on a ransomware recovery just out of the budget.
Have you by chance ever listened to the Darknet Diaries podcast?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good podcast. Hearing it from, I've actually under his disguise met him out at DEF CON, and that's how I kind of found out about the Darknet Diaries. And they're long, so they're hard to listen to, but they're also very interesting because they do come from the perspective of the criminal that's probably done, time already, has served time. And it is just interesting to hear their side of the story. So I haven't listened to a lot of them, but I found that really fascinating too, because, again, like you said in the beginning, that is their job. And so many of these people are just trying to make a living, and that's the way that they make their living, I guess, just like drug dealers or any other people that are living their life in a, not a legal way, and they're getting away with it. So it's just what are the board like? When it comes to the CISO and deciding if they're going to pay the ransom, obviously I would assume it's a board decision. How are the board taking? Are we seeing a difference in the board members seeing the seriousness of this? Isn't if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. Are they having that opinion now?
Yeah, and you make a good point. In an attack, it is almost never the CISO's call on whether or not we pay the ransom or not. And I say almost never because I've seen places where they defer to the CISO and like, what do you think we should do? And whatever he suggests or she suggests is kind of what they do. But that's an organization. It's a business decision. So whether it's the leadership team or the board or whatever, I think a lot of boards are starting to get a little bit more cyber smart. I'm not saying they're necessarily putting a CISO on the board and with someone with a lot of experience, but they understand that cybersecurity is a problem, something that needs to be addressed. They're getting reports on it, whether that's through an audit committee or reports from the CISO or whatever, someone's coming in and talking to them about it. They're at least aware of it. They're aware of what ransomware is, and especially very regulated industries. In these hospitals and stuff, they're aware that if this comes out, we're going to have to pay credit monitoring. We may have to pay some fines, and we don't want that to happen. So let's try to get the funding if we can and do it. There's still that back and forth balance of, we don't have a lot of money, we need to fund this. Does it just get punted down the road until an attack happens, and then all of a sudden that funding frees up? Still what we're seeing a lot of happening. It almost takes that attack to really get a company interested in heavily investing into cyber and bolstering those defenses. But I think boards overall are starting to understand that this is a problem and something that they're going to have to pay a little bit more attention to. And I've started to see some different board groups offer training for their members in security and things that they should be asking, things that they should be looking for, which is a good sign, right? We'll take it.
Are you seeing bigger organizations, institutions like you work for, really doing more training, taking their security team and bringing in the non-security employees and, really taking a serious, day to educate the other employees that aren't on the security teams?
There's a few larger enterprise level corporations that are doing that. I wouldn't say it's probably across the board right now. For us, we do phishing campaigns. We do yearly training and videos people have to watch. We try to gamify it to where if you report a certain way or do this properly, we're going to get you some company branded swag or maybe a free meal or something to motivate people to want to do it right. We do have some negative sides too. If you keep falling for the same type of phishing over and over and over again, like, you're going to have to go through some remedial training. We need you to be very cognizant of it. But that goes back. If you have, some of these enterprise companies have 10,000 plus, customers or employees. Again, it takes one person clicking an email, right, the credentials, and then the threat actors have a foothold. So I think the culture, cybersecurity culture and training is a hard, square to make happen, to get accurate. Probably a better time, you still do it. It checks a box, but also that shouldn't be your only box to check. You want to have a good defenses. You want to have security in depth. You want to have good training. You want to be keeping up on things. There's just a lot of different facets to all that kind of come together and make a good program.
So what advice would you end on this podcast? What advice would you give to the smaller companies out there that don't have big budgets for security? For maybe they're a one-man show, they have one person running their security, and that one person knows everything that we're talking about, but his hands are tied. He or she, their hands are tied because they don't know what to do because they don't have the funds. What advice would it be? And I know that's hard to give someone like that advice, but what would you leave our listeners with as far as what can they be doing to make their security posture stronger, even without the funds and the big teams that they should have in place? If you have an answer for that.
Yeah, I can definitely throw out a few things. So, CISA is the government branch of cybersecurity under Homeland Security. They're currently not open for business, but hopefully that changes soon. They do have a lot of free resources available to organizations, especially those that fall under critical infrastructure, from pen testing to vulnerability scans to DNS checking and all kinds of services that you can leverage for free. It's paid by tax dollars. So definitely reach out there, connect with them, and get those services stood up. It'll cost your organization no money at all. And then I think next is really just understanding how common attacks happen, especially in your industry, because different industries have different sort of attack vectors. And you can look at things like the MITRE framework. You can get your own third-party assessments. You can work with managed security service providers. But figure out those common techniques and tactics that threat actors use against your industry. A lot of the times that's going to be email for phishing. It's going to be unpatched systems. So if you can just do the minimum, if you have to invest in a couple products, an EDR for your endpoints and a good email security is a great place to start. And then just make sure, your servers, your computers, anything that has sensitive data on it, we're patching, we're keeping that up to date, and we're not putting that internet facing. If it has to be, you need to take some other precautions there, but just foundational level security practices. Look at where your attacks are coming from and just apply your funds there. And that should get you your best bang for your buck.
Ashini, if I'm saying it right, Sarati, she said, this is a really great one. Will be a recording we can get all of our podcasts. You can catch them on any place that you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify. But I do want to make a comment for those of you that listen to your podcast on Apple Play. We did change platforms, so refresh and Security for All, so you can catch, all of our speakers. Because when we go back to how you can, what advice you can give to some of these people is just educate yourself on listening to podcasts like this and listening to our keynote speakers. Go out on the FutureCon YouTube channel. There's so many podcasts out there, and just keep yourself educated. There's so many resources. So even though you don't have the funds, we have a big challenge, and but people are doing great things. So let's end this on that note. Like, what is one of the positive things that you see happening in the security world right now?
I think a lot of people are really starting to understand that security is important. They're starting to take it seriously. We're seeing more people realize that they have to, put MFA on their phones and protect their accounts and not use the same password for anything. It's actually starting to get more ingrained. I think the older generation, as they, they're kind of a weak point for us still, but they didn't grow up with that technology. These new generations that are coming in have grown up with cell phones in their hand more than just using a laptop. They've been growing up hearing about these types of attacks and these things going on. So they're a little bit more security minded. I think as they come into the workforce, we're going to see people who understand, like, oh yeah, I have to have an authenticator app on my phone. Yeah, I've always had to do that. Why would that be a problem? I want to have MFA on my accounts. I don't want to share my bank information. I don't want to do this. And they're going to realize they're going to be a better generation at understanding security and hopefully protecting stuff more. And AI, has some negatives, but also has some positives too. We're going to see AI being used to help protect organizations, help find threat actors and vulnerabilities and patch those in real time. And that's going to take a load off of the cyber defender. So all that together is going to make for hopefully a better security program in the future.
Well, Zach Lewis, he is the CISO CIO over at the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis. You can find him on his LinkedIn. You can find him. You'll see him on our YouTube channel at futureconevents.com. You could just check us out and you'll find more information about Zach. He'll be part of the keynote this Thursday at the St. Louis Cybersecurity Conference. Thank you, Zach, for spending time with us again. We really appreciate you being here, and I'm excited to see you on Thursday. Everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget that all of our events around the country, we do 30 of them. They stream live. We have one, if not every week, every other week, and you can catch all of our keynote speakers. You can catch all of our speakers just by registering at FutureCon events. And there's so much education out there because our speakers are amazing. So everyone, thank you so much. It just wasn't enough time with Zach, but we'll have to have him on again. But everyone, I hope you have a great Tuesday. Stay warm wherever you are. And maybe it is warm, but it's not warm in a lot of places right now. But stay safe, stay secure, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.